So recently there have been some posts about the worst and most awful takes in the Destiny community, and today I'm going to react to those and see what people are talking about. Even though these posts like this one from me are specifically asking for like the #1 worst take, I still think that there's a chance I will agree with some of the posts and some of the replies, some of the takes here. So anyway, let's begin. The worst take I've ever heard was one from the streamer Shroud, in which he said, and I am paraphrasing here, "Oh, I like this game. I just wish they got rid of abilities, the double jumps, the supers, the classes, and the aim assist." If you take away all these things that are highlighted right here, you are just deleting Destiny. Like, you might as well just have a new game at that point. I do kind of get what he was saying from a competitive Crucible standpoint. Like, I think this is definitely taken out of context. He was probably saying like the Crucible would be more balanced if there wasn't so much ability spam, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of get that, but you can't just remove the double jumps and the supers and the classes. You can't remove the classes, you know, come on. I mean, maybe in Destiny 3, we get some kind of rework system where the classes aren't rigid or something. Who knows? It's just a total guess. But yeah, a lot of these things you can't really separate from Destiny. Dude wants every game to be base CSGO. Yeah, that's basically what I'm saying. Like, you might as well make a new game at that point if you're going to delete all the stuff that makes Destiny, Destiny. I hear constant hate on LFGs. A lot of people paint this picture. Most of LFGs are a-holes that won't help you, but I never find this. I LFG every raid, and 99% of the time, everyone is cool and willing to help or give pointers if needed. I think I will disagree with this guy, because I would not say that 99% of LFGs are cool and willing to help and give pointers. I do think that the plight of the solo player, which is actually a video I posted a couple days ago, I do think that the plight of the solo player is real, because you can try to join a random LFG and people can be a little bit toxic sometimes. I'm not saying that it's every time, but I think that saying 99% of the time everyone is cool is a bit of an exaggeration. It gets annoying because it causes new players to be reluctant to even try the LFG system in Destiny. This I will agree with. I do think that due to the culture around LFG being toxic, people are less likely to jump in and try it out. And I will also say that, like, although I don't agree with the 99% stat, I do think that it's relatively likely that people will be nice. On to the next bad take. That certain new content in Destiny is too difficult, i.e. 0-hour mission right now. I hate how weak this community has become to challenging content. Wow, okay, spicy already. The moment someone faces an activity or challenge they can't immediately speedrun through and complete on a first run, the threats start coming about how it's too difficult and needs to be tuned down. This is actually quite a interesting post that came up the other day. Someone was complaining on the Bungie forums about how the 0-hour mission was too challenging, even on normal. And they were posting like, oh, it should be this power level instead of this power level. And then someone from the overall Bungie account came in and just commented just to lay down the law. They're like, they basically just said, "You're bad," as in a polite way. They were basically like, this was intended, it's not a bug, and not everything in this game is meant to be easy, which I thought was a completely base take from the Bungie employee, whoever wrote that. Now, this does kind of get us more into the difficulty debate, which I could talk about for probably 5 hours, but I think the ultimate point that is being summed up here is that not everything in the game can be easy, and some things need to be challenging, and that's okay. On a personal level, I really enjoyed the challenge here with 0-hour. Like, it took me and my team a few tries to beat it on Legend, and it felt like, you know, it wasn't just a complete pushover, which cannot be said for a lot of the other content in this game. And I think basically the reason why this is such a bad take is because it pushes the idea that everything in Destiny should be beatable by everyone, and that veteran players should be able to just steamroll it within 0.2 seconds of it coming out. And I think that kind of defeats the whole purpose of having content in the first place, because what's the point of making a build, right? What's the point of improving your skills? If everything's easy, there's no reason to do any of those things. So yeah, completely agree that this is an awful take, and let's move on. Destiny needs a new engine. Bungie should change engines. No, stop. You don't know how those things work. That would be a terrible idea. Yeah, so I think there was actually an interesting Reddit post from someone who actually does work at Bungie on the engines and on the servers and on the technical side of things. And he actually kind of broke it down as to why they use the engine that they use and why they should not switch to a new engine. But I think at the end of the day, like, the people who understand this on a really deep technical level would switch to a new engine if that was actually a viable and good thing to do. And I think it's rather strange for uneducated people on the internet to spout off their useless advice to the game developers when they really don't know what they're talking about and have no idea what an engine even is. So I definitely agree that this is a bad take. Bungie hates insert class and favors insert class and insert class. Yeah, this is a classic. People absolutely love to think that Bungie is like, oh, prejudiced against their class and only buffs the other class. But the funny thing is, like, if you look on Reddit, if you look on the YouTube comments, if you look on Twitter, literally everywhere, you will find instances, like on the same day, you will find instances of Bungie hates Warlocks, Bungie hates Titans, and Bungie hates Hunters, like within a few hours of each other. So people just think that Bungie hates their favorite class at all times. So yeah, definitely agree that this is a bad take. The regurgitation of whatever a streamer or content creator said in something they released that day, as if it's absolute indisputable fact. Yeah, I get this. I think that content creators are generally more knowledgeable than the average player, so it kind of makes sense to adopt some of their takes. But at the end of the day, like, you have to think for yourself. You have to be a logical person and come up with your own ideas. And it's probably not the best idea to just regurgitate what you hear as if it is indisputable fact. Like, content creators are still just normal people who are completely fallible and can make mistakes. So even though I'd say the average player is probably much more likely to be incorrect compared to a content creator, yeah, they're not perfect. Guys, Dado posted, my new opinion has arrived. Yeah, I think Dado even has memed about this, where he posts a video where it's just titled like, your new Destiny opinions have arrived. And then, yeah, the whole community just adopts these opinions. Not really a take, but the misinformation can be frustrating at times. Stuff like, if you want to get more catalysts to drop, you need to complete the ones you already have, or some lost sectors or exotics have higher drop rates than others. Yeah, actually, this is one of the main reasons why I started my Mythbusters series on my main channel, because people are just extremely misinformed, and especially in just online communities, and especially the Destiny community, like, misinformation and myths just spread like wildfire. And like, one person like has something that is just a coincidence, and then they post it, and then everyone believes it from then on. And it's really difficult to undo the misinformation. I mean, even after posting like literally 500 myths on my channel, I still hear them repeated like on a weekly basis. People still believing that they're real. So yeah, it's pretty interesting, but I think the community could definitely benefit from just, like I said in the previous one, having some more rational thought and thinking for themselves rather than just adopting the things that they hear, because a lot of times the things that they hear are just straight up misinformation. This just came up in my clan last week. Someone was adamant that doing lost sectors without an exotic weapon or armor equipped increased the drop rate. That would be quite an interesting mechanic if that was true. But yeah, that's a pretty hilarious example of misinformation. I mean, this guy probably just made this up, or maybe he heard it somewhere, but yeah, that's wild. I guess this maybe doesn't count as a take in the conventional sense, but every time Eris is in the narrative, people say that she's going to turn evil, and like, I get it to a degree. She is scary looking, and the early arc of her character had reason to be dubious about her motivations. Yeah, I kind of get this. I think that was probably my first reaction to her character. She looks kind of like a traditional enemy in other games, but I think this guy totally has a point, and this is a bad take. Just because Eris has demonstrated so many times, like you said, over the last 11 years, showing us she is nothing but reliable, loyal, and awesome. The chances of Eris being evil in the future, basically zero. So good, bad take here. I've brought this up before, but this small streamer once said that if you used an ability build, you were bad at the game. If you didn't use snipers, despite them being suboptimal, you were bad. And he also fought me when I told him he was wrong in remembering SMGs and bows in Destiny 1. His chat turned on me too, and it was an awful experience. What? I seriously do not understand. Like, obviously bows and SMGs are not in Destiny 1, and I feel like anyone with half a brain will remember this, or if they didn't play Destiny 1, they could easily fact check it in 0.1 seconds. This streamer sounds like quite a character. You can't really call someone bad just because they were using a certain build. Like, yeah, sure, certain builds are easier to use than others, but just by nature of using the build, that does not automatically make you bad. I don't know what this small streamer was on, but yeah, I think this fits the criteria of extremely bad take. People hate, and I mean hate, seeing Crimson in PvE when it's the fastest Lucky Pants stacking hand cannon in the game. I always have a flashy right raid port to get into something serious with LFGs because nobody can think beyond DPS on a gun. Okay, first of all, yes, people do not see past the DPS of a weapon quite a bit. And sometimes like an ad clear weapon even, people will be like, oh, it has bad damage, but it's not meant for dealing damage. Like not every single weapon in your loadout has to be meant for dealing damage. And you can also switch between it, you know, like you can have the ad clear weapon and then when you get to the boss, you can switch to the DPS weapon. Streamers dictate balance. Yeah, that's a pretty awful take. I will say that streamers / creators do have some influence because if they convince 200,000 people of something and then they start sharing all of that and it just gets amplified and shared all around the community, sure, it could be an influential part, but to say that they dictate the balance is categorically false. Given these are all just based on my experiences, maybe they aren't popular or whatever, I just happen to see it condensed, I don't know. Crafting is bad for the game. It usually pops up in bursts and never gains mass momentum, to be fair. Same people say farming RNG is superior, but neglect months of RNG leading to super fast burnout. Here's what I'll say on this. Crafting does reduce replayability for certain activities. Because if you have the loot crafted 5 out of 5, there's no reason to go back and do it again for loot reasons. Like you can go back and do it again if you want to and if you think it's fun, but there's no loot reason to go back. For RNG, if you have a 4 out of 5, sure, you don't really need to, but there's always that hope of getting the 5 out of 5. And that kind of keeps the replayability factor alive. Even if you've done a raid 30 times, you probably have some pretty good rolls, but you still want that 5 out of 5, and you might only have a 3 out of 5 or a 4 out of 5. So you have like 95% of the best loot, but there's still a chance of getting just a little bit more. And I think that does a lot for the replayability of the game. With that said, though, I understand that it can be really frustrating if you have bad RNG and you just didn't get the roll that you wanted after tons and tons and tons of runs. And I can understand what this guy is saying, you know, like leading to super fast burnout. I'm not going to say that I completely 100% agree with either side of this argument because I can definitely see both sides and many people just have different experiences. Lightfall was worse than Curse of Osiris. Really only I saw limited people make this hot take, but is it stupid? Yeah, this is a completely awful take. Like, okay, Curse of Osiris was so bad that the game was weeks away from dying. Bungie put out this graph where they showed the population over time. And if you just continued the graph down like a couple more weeks, the game would have basically nobody playing it. And they talked about this in one of their GDC presentations. They were like, yeah, if this keeps going at this rate, literally nobody's going to be left playing the game. And, you know, Lightfall was a rough experience, a rough time, but we were nowhere near that level of death that we were during Curse of Osiris. That most exotics are bad. Most are not bad. Just because they don't compete as options against the meta doesn't necessarily mean they're bad. I don't know if I illustrated my point clearly here, though. Hopefully you get the idea. I mean, I kind of get the idea, but the objective stick that a weapon is being measured by, or in this case, it could be an exotic armor too, the objective way to measure if something is good is by comparing it to other things, the other options at your disposal. So if they don't compete against the meta, then kind of by definition, they aren't very good. But I also will say that like, not everything has to be good. And there are exotics that can be like okay and unique and interesting and fun that aren't super OP and aren't the meta. And you can still use those if you want. So I think that's might be the angle that this guy was kind of going for. It's okay that it's overpowered because it's PvE. Makes me glad that Bungie is adept at responding to player feedback. Okay, it's more okay if it's in PvE. If something's busted in Crucible, it's actively, and I mean busted, not just like, oh, slightly good. If something is truly busted in the Crucible, it ruins the experience for everyone playing. If something is busted in PvE, okay, you just beat stuff a little bit easier. So I'm not saying that it's 100% okay for stuff to be overpowered in PvE, but at the same time, you're not actively ruining the experience for other people like you were in the Crucible. So I kind of get where this bad take is coming from, even though I still think it's a bad take. That PvP keeps this game alive. Okay, I don't think it keeps the game alive, but I think it definitely contributes to keeping the game alive. Let's go on Destiny Tracker and see what it's looking like today. Yesterday, there were 800,000 PvE players and 663,000 Crucible players. So, yeah, would the game survive if Crucible got deleted? Yeah, probably, but we would lose 663,000 people, or at least upset 663,000 people who were literally playing Crucible yesterday. And the thing is this doesn't even take into account like the people who played once a week or once every other week that didn't just happen to play yesterday. This dude is notorious for hating PvP. Don't bother debating. Oh, interesting. Maybe he like recognizes his username as someone who just replies hating on PvP in every post. That's pretty funny. Ad clear is an important role too. I mean, it completely depends on the encounter. Some you will have a very difficult time clearing the encounter if you don't clear any of the ads. So, okay, I get where this take is coming from though. You certainly do have to do the actual mechanics, and you can't just put everybody on ad clear, which seems to be the overwhelming trend in the LFG community. That Thunderlord is a good DPS option. It's a complete death of actually learning to be a better player. Okay, a couple thoughts here. First of all, Thunderlord kind of was a thing like a while back, but now it's not really anymore. There used to be this like strange thing where it was like dealing double proc with divinity or something. I don't really remember exactly what it was, but there was a time when it was good, and I think people are probably just remembering back to that time and assuming that it still is good even though it was fixed. It's not the best, but the reason people keep suggesting it is because it's easy to 2-3 phase most bosses if there's a lot of raiders who are just bad at aiming and bad at DPS, so rockets and linears actually end up doing less damage for them. I think this guy in the replies is actually making a fairly valid point. I mean, if you absolutely suck at doing DPS rotations with other weapons, your best option might actually be Thunderlord, even though Thunderlord is not that great anymore. But yeah, I think it's probably worth at that point just learning how to do an actual DPS rotation. So yeah, you should probably just do that. You must always rock a min-max build even if the activity doesn't call for it. Yeah, I think this is definitely a bad take because sometimes you can just have a fun build that you want to enjoy using in Patrol where it literally doesn't matter, or in a really random bad easy strike. You know, you don't have to always use the top of the meta, and personally, I find it extremely boring to only use one loadout 100% of the time. So in this case, yeah, I completely agree this is a bad take. My take is that Lightfall wasn't actually that bad, and most of the responses to it were overreactions from people who don't have any media literacy. Okay, wow. Yeah, I completely disagree with this take. I think that Lightfall did do certain things really well, and actually I had a relatively positive response to it on day one because I was like, the gameplay is pretty good. The new systems like loadouts were pretty good. Like the expansion did some good to the game as a whole, but you really can't say that the story was amazing. Like, it's completely ridiculous to say that people who disliked the story disliked it because they have no media literacy. That's just completely unreasonable. That the game is dying. Even on Destiny's worst days, it still ranks in the Steam's top 10 games. This is actually not true at all. This year especially, the game has fallen out of the top 10 quite a lot. But I also do agree that the game is not dying, at least not right now. I get this comment about 5 times every day. Someone in my YouTube comments is like, yeah, Destiny's dead. Why do you still talk about it? And then the video has several 100,000 views, which really doesn't make any sense. But yeah, I think it's quite overblown to say that the game is dying / dead. But at the same time, who knows what the future holds? It might be dead in 2 years, or it might not be. Well, we'll just have to wait and see. People definitely overhate on Plunder. I thought it was a nice change of theming. I just wish they pushed it further. Pirates of different factions, maybe even the chance to customize our own catch. Okay, first of all, that would have been an interesting twist, but I actually disagree. I think that people hate Plunder for a reason, and it was statistically one of the worst seasons that we've ever had in terms of player count, in terms of like the Google trend interest in the game. It was a pretty low. So I think it is fair to say that Plunder wasn't the greatest, and I'm not sure if it's fair to say that people overhate on it. I think it's well-deserved. How everyone and their mom is just convinced that Bungie got handed $3.6 billion liquid cash. Okay, anyone who thinks this, let me explain. I am not an expert on this, but That's not how acquisitions work. It's not like they just handed Bungie billions of dollars and said, okay, go make the best game you can possibly make. It's a lot more complicated when they work it into vesting schedules and they give it to the shareholders and they give it to many other people that aren't just people who want to reinvest it into making a better game. You know, it would be really great if they just spent all that money making Destiny the best it could possibly be, but unfortunately, that's not really what's going on. I hate when people say exotics were rare or hard to get in Destiny 1 because besides D1 Year 1, this is just a lie. 3 of Coins were absolutely broken when they were added, and they're still really strong, and most exotic quests were incredibly easy and were just busy work. Certain exotic quests were definitely hard. Remember, like the Thorn quests or the Chaperone quests, like there were certainly ones that were not just a pushover. And I think in D2, it has certainly gotten easier to get exotics. I mean, you could literally, like, I feel like I have 10 exotic engrams in my character right now. I could get 10 more in like a couple hours of playing. It is unbelievably easy to get exotics in Destiny 2 right now. So I think it is a factual statement that they were more rare in Destiny 1, but I would not say that they were super rare or super hard to get. Bungie abandoned Destiny for Marathon. Okay, this is certainly not the case, simply because Bungie doesn't know if Marathon's gonna work. Marathon could be a complete flop, and then they would just be screwed. If they had completely abandoned Destiny just to work on Marathon, and then Marathon doesn't work out, they would be completely screwed as a company, and nobody in their right mind would do that. So, especially with, you know, the recent updates and the recent news about Destiny coming out, like there's no chance that Bungie is just going to abandon Destiny for their new game that isn't even coming out until 2025. That new game engine would solve all of the issues with bugs and glitches, and that last-gen consoles are holding the game back. Okay, well, this is kind of two different ones, so we have to break it down. The first one, yeah, we talked about that earlier with the whole game engine thing. That's already done. But the second part, last-gen consoles are holding the game back. I think this is actually a good take. Last-gen consoles objectively do hold certain aspects of the game back. With that said, I don't think we will ever delete the old consoles until enough people switch off of them. Like right now, I'd say there's still a substantial amount of people on PS4, Xbox One. And if Bungie were just to stop supporting them, they would probably lose quite a bit of revenue from those people who no longer have the game because they can't have the new expansion. Bungie having the worst microtransactions in the industry. Yeah, that's pretty objectively false. Thinking that making a Destiny 3 would fix all of the issues. I mean, okay, take a look at Destiny 2 Year 1. It definitely did not fix all of the issues, and in fact, it introduced a whole bunch of new issues that weren't even in Destiny 1. So, it certainly wouldn't fix all the issues. It might improve certain things, and, you know, if we got a fresh start, you know, that would address quite a lot of stuff. But overall, definitely a bad take. It would not fix all the issues. Just play another game anytime someone has a single piece of critical feedback about anything whatsoever. Mac is spot on with this one. I mean, it is a completely awful take to just say to play another game because you have one critical thing to say about the game. I mean, I think in a lot of these cases, the reason why you have critical feedback is because you want to see the game improve because you like it in the first place. If you really didn't like the game and just wanted to go play something else, you would just go play something else. And look, lovely, I got kicked to orbit. Not to be an armchair dev, but insert armchair dev comment. Yeah, this is actually quite a big problem, and I think people in the community actually just really suck at giving feedback to begin with. Most people don't really understand that game developers want to hear your problems and your symptoms, but they don't really want to hear what your solutions are. I think you meant to say, think PvP maps will save PvP. So they certainly won't single-handedly save PvP. Obviously, there's a lot of other factors, but PvP maps in general do an unbelievable good job at freshening up the experience in PvP. Because if you've played the same map for literally 10 years in a row, it just gets so unbelievably stale. So having a new map, a new environment, a new sandbox to kind of mess with is so refreshing and so interesting. So I do agree that they won't single-handedly save PvP, but they could definitely do a substantial amount of work in making PvP better. That abilities should be removed from PvP. I mean, I think it would be ridiculous to remove abilities from every single mode, but there is the hardware mode now where you only use your weapons, and a lot of people really like that. So I think I will disagree and say that certainly there is a place for having no abilities, but it's just not every single mode. This is make or break for Destiny. I think in a lot of cases, people say this every single year, and it's not actually true. But also, at certain points, there have been, and there probably will continue to be, make or break moments. So I think I'll partially disagree. This is actually a good take sometimes, but a lot of the times, bad take. If they just listened to our ideas, the game would be so much better. You know, there actually are quite a few examples of Bungie listening to our ideas, and then the game became worse. Like, for example, Destiny 2 Year 1, the state of Crucible, the state of like double primary and weapons and time to kills and abilities, that was all because of people's complaining in Destiny 1 Year 3. Same with artifacts. People were complaining about how they didn't have a way to constantly level up, so Bungie added in the artifact leveling system and the season pass and stuff. They also asked for metas to change all the time because people were getting bored of metas not changing. So they added the artifact mods, and now people hate the artifact mods. So yeah, this is an absolutely terrible take because a lot of times players don't know what they want. Kind of weird to say, but a lot of times the takes that players have are just absolutely terrible. And this video is a perfect example of why Bungie should not always listen to the player base. There is, of course, a time to listen to feedback, but you can't just listen to every single idea and expect to have a good game as a result. People who have soloed raids and dungeons saying Destiny 2 is too easy. Brothers and sisters in the light, you have beaten the game. Only thing we can do next is find creative ways to challenge ourselves or maybe take on a different game. This one is interesting. I mean, it's not unreasonable for veteran players to want the game to challenge them still and not have to go quit and find a new game or creative challenges like this guy is suggesting. You shouldn't have to come up with some artificial handicap on yourself just to be challenged by something in the game. So I'm not saying that everything needs to be hard, but I do think that there should be something that is really difficult for these top players to go try to beat and actually be challenged by. With stuff like Pantheon and Onslaught recently, I think these are actually pretty solid examples of stuff that gets harder over time. And the player base as a whole seems to be loving it, even though not every single player will get a Wave 50 Onslaught and not every single player will get the last week of Pantheon. And that's okay. Unpopular opinion. Nothing will change fundamentally with a 5-year-old game, and the community needs to come to terms with that. Most of the gameplay systems are just in place now and will stay until the game is sunset. I think this is categorically false. I mean, you can look at the history of the game. You can look at how weapons changed from double primary to having special and primary and heavy. You can look at crafting being introduced. You can look at loadouts being introduced. You can look at so many different things. You can even look at Prismatic as a great example. There are so many fundamental ways to the way the game works that have changed in the past few years that I think ultimately that's what is keeping the game alive. Having a shakeup in the formula where everything is not just the same. Because I mean, if this was the same game that we had in 2017 when it came out, the game would certainly be dead. You know, if there was never any innovation, if the game just stayed exactly the way it was when it first came out, it would not be around anymore. Nobody would be playing. So I think it's actually essential that we continue to innovate and we continue to evolve over time. And yeah, I just completely disagree with this guy saying that things will never change. In a 2014 GDC presentation, a Bungie developer showed how to create an armor piece from scratch in 20 minutes. I don't want to hear any excuses people make for Bungie about why it's so hard to develop content like armor sets. Okay, so I actually went and found this thing that he was referencing, and this guy was creating an armor set. It wasn't even an armor set, it was just a helmet, and it was created from all of these like pre-existing assets that are in here. So the assets weren't actually being created themselves, nor were any of the actual details of the armor. It's just throwing these pieces together. And there's a whole lot more work that goes into creating a piece of armor than just this small process that is shown here. So I think it's a completely terrible take to be like, oh, they can just make another helmet in 20 minutes. And also, like, if they were to just create helmets based on these sole, really simple, outdated assets, all the helmets would look the same. Like, they have to create new assets from scratch that actually look interesting and unique. Otherwise, stuff would just look identical to everything else ever since 2014. So yeah, completely disagree with this guy. Gambit is a fun game mode. Nice one. You don't need vault space. Interesting. I mean, especially after stuff has now been unvaulted. That's a really interesting one to look at in the past. PvP is just as important for PvE for the game. Wow. I mean, even as a PvP player, I'm just going to come out and say this game would not survive with only the Crucible. Like, I really like the Crucible. I play it a lot, but I don't think that the overall audience of this game would continue playing it, especially playing it for 10 years, if there was only Crucible. So I think PvE is definitely more important. I guess it's more so a question of how much more important is PvE. Hot take, remove champions from the game or make all weapons capable of stunning them all the time. I'm sick of Bungie dictating high-level contents builds. Wow, yeah, that is certainly a hot take, and I'd say it's definitely a bad take as well. I mean, if you make all weapons target and stun all champions, then you might as well just remove them from the game at that point, because there's no point in them existing if they're countered by every single weapon in the game. I mean, I think, you know, champions can sometimes be slightly annoying, but also at the same time, like, if you want to fix them, there's got to be a better way to fix them than just removing them from the game. If you're getting mad at Crucible, it's your fault for having a mindset that leads into being able to get mad. You know, I think this is actually a good take. Like, sure, there are things in Crucible that are more frustrating than others, and sure, certain metas can be really obnoxious. But at the same time, like, if you're getting really, really frustrated at Crucible and being really mad, it's kind of your own fault. That adepts are required for endgame content. An amazing roll on a normal gun is better than an okay roll on adept. Yes, this is 100% true. I mean, adepts are a nice to have at best. Like, they really are not required. They barely matter, even in Crucible. Don't waste your strange coins on a rocket from Xur. All right, I think we've reached the bottom of this one. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Leave a like if you want, and I'll catch you in the next one.